Now, let's take a look at what a typical analytics translation project roadmap might look like. We'll start with a reminder of the identifying data journey we talked about in Chapter 3 and how one might go through a personalization journey. So to go through the project roadmap, we'll use the translation value construct of a customer loyalty program for a consumer-facing business. We've simplified the program development into 4 steps. The first step is to actually design how the various loyalty constructs are going to be computed. The computation should mainly depend on the objectives and KPIs of the program. The next step is to map out the processes required to actually compute the loyalty constructs. There are a number of ways to approach that. We've chosen a tiered approach for this example. The tiers can be made up of a few permutations, depending on what the business wants to achieve with this loyalty program. These processes are double-sided. On the customer side, we refer to them as customer journeys. On the system side, they are referred to as system flows, which then develop into data flows. This is an online store, so everything happens online with no human interaction except for delivery, which falls outside of the computation model. If there was human intervention in the process, then the processes would be 3-sided, with an operational process side added. This is one of the main jobs of an analytics translator, mapping this 2- or 3-sided process model and translating that into a data construct that can be actioned by the analytics team. For purposes of this illustration, we've mapped out a simplified model of an online store purchasing process. When a customer visits the store records a visit from that customer. Depending on legislation in that country and the settings on the customer's device, it might even record the location of the customer. The customer's device user agent can be used to determine the type of device the customer is using. Should the customer abandon their journey here for whatever reason, from an analytics perspective, a couple of things can be inferred about the type of customer. The customer LSM can be inferred based on the fact that the device the customer is using is an expensive smartphone and the customer location is Santon, for example. This could be useful if customers with the same profile keep abandoning their journeys at this point. It might be inferred that the storefront or landing page might be unappealing to a certain LSM, for example. The customer then navigates the store. We get more data here about the customer's preferences from their store browsing data. Clicking on an item infers deeper interest in that particular item by the customer. Very useful data in the process of personalizing value for that particular customer. Customers are not necessarily going to buy everything they like, so purchases are not enough to map out a fully personalized profile. This is typically system-generated data, so as an analytics translator, you have to find out where this is sitting and make note of it in your 2- or 3-sided process model. You might have used a promotional code to promote the store on social media platforms. This data is crucial because it can tell you which advertising platforms are effective. As a translator, you have to go back to your data map and identify where the various components of this data are stored. So say, for example, you issued a different promotional code for every advertising platform, including word of mouth, incentive promotions for existing customers. The use of the promotional codes can give you a picture in terms of the reach and conversion rates for different promotions. Customers don't always click the store link on social media platforms, for example. They might make a note and access the store directly at a later stage. So the promotional code can give you an indication without having to bother the customer with a boring survey. This journey example captures the customer delivery details before payment in order to calculate delivery costs and add them to the total amount due. We've already talked about the significance of location. This kind of information is captured into a profile system on the frontline view of your data map, so identify where it's sitting. More information can be inferred from the customer payment method. If the customer uses a private bank credit card, for example, this information can be valuable in further personalizing the customer profile, both from individual and persona group perspectives. Again, different components of this billing data are stored in different places on your data map. It's enough for you as a translator to identify the system the data is sitting and its various attributes. So now that we've got our purchasing journey, as translators, we can then map out points of the data we can use for our loyalty KPI computation. Now let's go back to the computation processes. At the promotional code stage, we can track the promotional code to a customer referral program and allocate loyalty points to the customer linked to that particular referral code. Depending on the rand value spent, the computation model can account for higher allocation of points to both the referring party and the purchasing party. Furthermore, the perceived quality of the referred customer based on LSM data can also result in further point allocations. It's the translator's job to do this, not the data's team. This is value construct work. It's the translator's job to define how the customer gets rewarded. Once the 2 or 3-sided processes have been mapped with data points and associated sources, it's then up to the technical teams to map out the system flows and start the technical work. Another approach is to overlay the 2 or 3-sided process model across the value discovery map we discussed in Chapter 4. In this case, we're dealing with consumer products and services. And the product browsing and selection is a store function that happens on the operational layer. Similarly, adding an item to the basket and paying for it happens on both the operational and technology layers. We carry on in the same manner for all the other journey points. You then overlay the journey points on your system data map. Now you have both a business view and a data view. We can then move on to the work breakdown structure and capture the activities for the project roadmap. The activities now make sense because we've gone through what they entail in detail, and you can then plan your timing accordingly. We've come to the end of chapter 5. We now move on to the last chapter, chapter 6.